There we go. And now, all right, how about that? Are you able to see that?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so Well-Architected is it's a framework that our team had put together in conjunction with our product leads, some of our other technical architects and customer-facing architects. Some of our community members contributed to it, and basically it's divided up. We've got prescriptive guidance and information about how to think of each of these topics as an architect. These are all things that we think would go into a well-architected, healthy Salesforce solution. And then we've also got a list of patterns and anti-patterns and things that you can actually look for within your Salesforce org to see if you're doing something going in the right direction, if you're going in the wrong direction and maybe need to refactor something before you move forward with it. And this is all available for free on architect.salesforce.com. So you can go and read it. In fact, we redesigned the whole layout of our Salesforce Architects website to be focused on Well-Architected, and we're aligning a lot of our other tools and products to Well-Architected. So our three pillars, we've got trusted, and these are in order based on how important they are. So obviously, if your solution is not trusted, it's not gonna matter if it's easy or adaptable. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that our stakeholders are confident that that the solution is going to do what they need it to, that their data is going to be protected, that it's going to be compliant with local regulations, and also that it's going to perform the way that they expect it to and be available. And then we've also got easy. So we're going to make sure that it can actually deliver value fast. And the thing I always like to say about this one is easy does not mean that it's easy to architect. Easy means that as an architect, you've made all the hard decisions to make it easy for your stakeholders to use your solution. And that means that you're using the most straightforward engineering possible, and you're not overcomplicating things. That you've got automations, but that your automations align to your business values. So you're actually meeting your KPIs, and that it's engaging. Your users are going to want to use it and adopt it. And then adaptable, which is that it can evolve as your business evolves. You don't want to have to completely re-architect something every time. And that means it's resilient, so it can handle some unexpected change, isn't going to completely disrupt your business and grind everything to a halt. You can bring things back online in a predictable manner, and you can handle those issues elegantly. And that it's composable, so it's built out of modular units that can fit together, as opposed to being just a giant monolith application. And we're going to go a little bit more into this. I'm going to talk about some of our own team's lessons learned while we were building this framework. But the first thing I'm going to actually do is tell you a story. So to give you a little bit of my own history, I work for Salesforce now, and I've worked for Salesforce for almost 5 years, since 2018. Before that, I worked for the city of Chicago and helped to redesign the 311 system for the city of Chicago. Prior to that, I had been leading digital transformations at a lot of large Fortune 500 companies. So Komatsu, Office Max, one of the other ones was Miller Coors. And Miller Coors is a big beer company. So in addition to all of my Salesforce certifications, I actually also have another industry certification that literally am a certified beer expert. And since this is October and it's Oktoberfest, I thought I would tell you a story about beer that I promise will relate back to Well-Architected and Salesforce, but you're going to have to bear with me for a minute and listen to it. So the first thing I'm going to ask, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so you can see me, is there we go. You able to see me? All right. Show of hands. How many people have seen one of these before? One of these German beer steins, right? Okay, there's actually an interesting, so usually if you go to a bar, you'll see these, they're kind of decorative, and maybe if you go out, there's some places that might serve beer in them as kind of like a historical thing. What a lot of people don't realize is that these, a few hundred years ago, actually served a functional purpose, and people had to drink beer out of them for a reason. And that is because back in the 1600s, beer was actually really disgusting. If you drank it, the reason that this is solid instead of see-through is because usually when you drank beer, the filtering techniques weren't really good, so it would have things floating in it. And the reason it has the little lid is because it smelled disgusting, and the idea was that you would kind of have to like open the lid, hurry up and drink it, and then close the lid again so you didn't have to look at it or smell it. And you might be wondering, okay, well, why would somebody actually drink something like that? And the reason is because not only was beer disgusting, but water was actually even worse back then, because people didn't really understand germ theory and the idea that letting your farm animals bathe in a stream and then scooping a bucket of water out of the same stream and bringing it home and drinking it for dinner with your family is probably not a great idea. So even though people didn't understand the science behind it, they did understand that water would make them sick a lot of times, and beer usually didn't make them sick unless they drank too much of it. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again really quickly. And see here. There we go. So in a town called Pilsen, which is in Czechoslovakia, just outside of near Germany and Poland, they actually had an even worse problem because their beer actually was making people sick. And so if you can think about how strong bacteria needs to be to survive being in a container of alcohol and still be strong enough to make you sick when you drink it, that's pretty nasty, right? So what happened was the people in the town finally got tired of dealing with having to deal with drinking beer like that was making them sick. So they ran into the brewery, they knocked over all the barrels of beer, and they dragged the brewmaster out and ran him out of town. And that didn't really solve their problem because their water still wasn't good, but now they just didn't have any beer to drink, and things got pretty bad. This was a pretty nasty time to be alive, by the way. Whenever I hear this story, it makes me happy to be living when we do. But here comes our hero. So Mr. Joseph Groll was the son of a brewmaster in Bavaria, and his dad was a brewmaster in Germany. Joseph Groll had some ideas for some new brewing techniques that he wanted to try out. His dad was a little bit old-fashioned, decided, you know what, we want to keep doing things the way we're doing them. So Joseph Groll decided to leave and go off on his own. And he heard that there was a job opening in Pilsen. So he goes there, pulls out all of the equipment from the brewery, tells everybody in the town, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to be your new brewmaster. Don't worry about it. Just trust me on this. I know what I'm doing. Rips out all the equipment, throws it all away, starts over again, builds all new equipment. And everybody's wondering what this crazy guy is doing and sitting in the brewery every night for like months and months at a time. But he finally gets it done. And then he brews a batch of beer, and takes about a month or so to brew a batch of beer. So finally, when he comes out, he calls a town meeting, and he calls all the people in the town to come together. And he walks out of the brewery, and instead of holding up a beer stein full of beer, he holds up just a regular glass, and the beer is clear. The sun is shining through it. And he announces to the town that he has brewed the world's first golden beer. And then he invites everybody to try it. And what he had done when he completely ripped all the equipment out of the brewery, his own ways of brewing had new filtration techniques, and it had like airtight seals on the mash tunes that you use, the big copper kettles that you see. And he had a whole bunch of new modern ways to brew beer, and everybody in the town loved it. And in fact, the word of his brewing techniques spread all the way through the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then to Germany and Poland and all the surrounding areas, and then throughout Europe and throughout the world. And literally today, any beer that you drink, it doesn't matter where, if you can get it from a large brewer like a Budweiser or a Miller Coors, all the way down to your local craft brewery down the street, it is still following Joseph Groll's brewing techniques, the way that this beer was brewed. And so the entire beer industry has changed over time. It's adapted, but maybe people have modernized the equipment a little bit, but it's still based on the foundations. And you can actually still get his beer too. It's called Pilsner Urquell. You may have drank it and not even realized it. So what does that have to do with Salesforce and Well-Architected? Well, let's take another look back at our pillars, and we can see that we've got trusted. So basically what he brewed a beer that you can drink without getting sick. That's pretty nice. It's a good way to trust something. It's easy. You don't have to drink it out of a special glass. It goes down nicely. You're not worried about swallowing like chunks of things when you're drinking your beer. That's nice and easy. And it's adaptable. Like I said, his methods of brewing have survived for hundreds of years, even with changes to the industry and all around the world. Right? So congratulations to Joseph Grohl for coming up with a well-architected solution 300 years before well-architected was actually a thing. But when you think about how you want to design your Salesforce solutions, there's a lot of the same thing, right? You want to make sure your solutions are trusted. You want to make sure that your users are, they know that their data is protected, that they're not worried about having somebody sue your company because it's not compliant with some regulation, that your system is going to be available, that it's going to perform, that it's going to scale as the business grows. You want it to be easy to use. You want it to be you want it to have the right kind of automations in the right places. You want it to be adopted. People want to actually adopt it and enjoy using it. And then, you want it to be resilient. You want it to adapt and evolve with your business. So you don't have to keep redesigning things every time there's a small change. And so our team, our journey to launch Well-Architected, I know a handful of people mentioned that they've heard of Well-Architected before. Did anybody, by any chance, was anybody at Dreamforce last year, not this past Dreamforce, or did you watch it on Salesforce Plus? If you did, you would have seen Parker Harris actually announced that we were going to be creating Well-Architected. And Carlos, I see you. It's good to see you too, Carlos. So Parker made this announcement about Well-Architected, and originally we had 5 pillars instead of 3. And we kind of went through a series of iterations. It took us about a year from the time that we first announced it until the time we rolled it out. And that was because our team spent all this time making sure that the way that we were putting the framework together was actually going to be something useful for architects, and that some of the topics were going to be easy to remember, and but it was also going to contain enough information, and that you were going to be able to dig down deep into some of these topics and make sure that it's useful. So we did that. We also had our product teams, our engineering teams, sort of experts from our customer success teams that would then contribute and weighed in on what we had already written and told us what we needed to revise based on what they were seeing out in the field. We did some layouts for how our website is going to look to support Well-Architected. So if anybody had seen architect.salesforce.com up until a couple months ago when we launched Well-Architected, if you haven't looked at it in a while and you go to look at it now, you'll see that the layout is completely different because we wanted to make sure that Well-Architected was embedded into everything within the website. And then the last thing, we had our subject matter experts from a variety of different places throughout Salesforce, and even some of our community members that gave us some feedback, and we made some updates. And then the last thing we did, we went and we staged it, and then finally we launched it in September. And like I said, we just announced the official launch at Dreamforce this year. And while we were doing that, we had a few of our own learnings, right? So one of them is that when you think about Salesforce architecture in general, there's a lot of good information that you need to know about building flows and when you should use flow versus Apex, and a lot of the things that architects deal with every day. But it occurred to us that there's actually a lot of underlying functionality within the platform and the way that the platform works kind of under the hood that you should know about, that you need to know about in order to understand the recommendations that we're giving. So the first thing we did, or actually it wasn't the first thing we did, it was something that we had done after we had built this framework. We went back and we kind of built this architecture basics document. So understanding what the difference is between data and metadata, something that's really important, especially for new architects. Understanding what is a transaction and how are they used within the system. Understanding how do you use APIs, and which APIs deal with data, which APIs deal with metadata, and why versions make all the difference when you're using APIs. So we have this architecture basics document also available on the Architect website. And there's another one called the platform multi-tenant architecture document, which was originally written maybe 10 years ago, and it used to live on the Salesforce developers site. That document was written, when it was first written, it had a lot of good technical information, but it was originally designed to be more of a marketing tool, because if you think about back in 2010 through 2012, there was still a lot of a lot of organizations were concerned about putting data in the cloud and how is Salesforce going to work and how does it separate your data versus somebody else's data. And what that document does a good job of is talking about all of the under the hood things. So what does our data model actually look like underlying behind the scenes? Not just the objects that you create in Salesforce, but what actually happens when you create an object? What does our database do? How does our indexing work? So how do you know that global search is going to work the way that it does when you save a record? And all of these things are things that maybe as an architect, you cannot control yourself, but it's still good to understand how they work so that you can make better decisions when you're deciding what direction you want to go in with the things that you do have control over. So that's the first place that we added some content. And then after that, as we were building out the platform, we learned that some of the things, so trusted. So obviously there's authentication and authorization. So being able to say who you are when you access the system and having the system know that you are who you say you are versus what you can do in the system. One of the advice that we like to tell people, you should be creating Salesforce users based on individuals, not personas. And I know that we've all done that. We've all seen this at least, and probably a lot of us have done it. I know I had done this in the past where you create a integration user. And your one integration user shares all of the integrations that come in from all the systems you're integrated with, and every record that gets created as a result of that of any integration is owned by that user, right? So that's obviously don't do that, and it may sound obvious when we're talking about it here, but like I said, I've seen that a number of times, and early on in my career, I even did it a few times. So, but then when you think about what users can actually access, that's when you do think about it in terms of personas. So you're not generating a bunch of individual profiles for each individual user. You want to think about in terms more of permission sets or your OWDs and sharing rules, and making sure that those apply a little bit more broadly to a persona rather than just saying, Bob needs to access this group of records and Sally needs to access this group. And then organization-wide defaults. This one is a good one that we are still discussing and having some discussions about, but it's on what it says on the site is there, and we stand behind it, which is for internal OWDs, not external. External are completely different, but for internal OWDs, we are actually recommending that the default be public read only unless your business deals with sensitive data, and then you would use private. And the reason that we're making that recommendation is because what we found in a lot of cases is that if you set all of your internal OWDs to private, what you end up doing is having to create a bunch of one-off sharing rules to handle every exception that you need to that. And then your sharing model gets overcomplicated. It hurts performance. It takes a long time to recalculate sharing rules. And, unless you have a legit business reason for it, obviously, then you should set it to private, but you should be thinking about keeping them public read only. And then external OWDs, obviously, those should be private by default unless you have a very good business justification not to. But that is one that we've had discussions about it with our security team and other architects, and right now that is the guidance we're giving in Well-Architected. And then failure mitigation is, it's something that people don't always think about, but when your system fails, when you're troubleshooting, why did it fail, rather than just looking only for a technical solution and deciding that that's the right answer, it might actually be a process or people might be the underlying issue, and you might have more to change than just going in and fixing whatever defect caused the failure in the first place. And when we think about easy, this one is, it's funny because it seems like it should be obvious, but the number of people who have told us things like, well, nobody has time to document things and keep their documentation up to date, and realistically, we're not going to do that because we're too busy. Okay, but the reality is, without meaningful documentation, you're going to end up having teams doing a lot of rework or trying solutions that you already would have known that they would have failed if they would have been documented right the first time. And keeping records of why certain decisions were made the way that they were, and making sure that your code itself is documented if you're writing any code, and that your solutions have a clear overview of what your solution looks like, so that you should be able to, as an architect, finish a project and move on to the next project. And whoever picks up whatever you were working on should be able to clearly understand all of the work you did, so that they can continue to make good decisions that are based on the foundational ones that you already made. Automation, this is another one that's kind of interesting. So we, SOQL is pretty common to use when people write a lot of write Apex, and they'll use SOQL to search for data. One of the things that you may not realize, and you can actually read about it a little bit in the architecture basics document and in the multi-tenant architecture document that I talked about earlier, is that every time you write a SOQL statement, when the system executes it, under the hood, what it's actually doing is preparing itself as if it were getting ready to do a DML operation. Even if all you're doing is searching for a record, the system loads all of the other overhead that it needs to actually write records back to the database. So what we're recommending is, if all you need to do is search for something, you should actually use SOSL instead of SOQL. And then if you are planning on searching for something and manipulating some data and writing it back, then yeah, use SOQL for that. But that's actually a nice performance tip that you can think about, that not a lot of people know about. And then the other one in the middle there is optimization. I know a lot of our documentation still says this, but that one automation per object is old advice that probably made sense years ago when we were talking about process builders, and we didn't have all of the new features and tools that we have now, like to orchestrate automations and build subflows and control the order that flows execute when they're record triggered. But one automation per object, it's still in a lot of our text. It's not actually the best practice that it used to be a few years ago, and we purposely did not say that in Well-Architected because it's not you should be thinking about multiple automations per object, and then it's on you to figure out how to orchestrate all those automations the right way. Recognitions and rewards is how users, and this is part of engaging, and how to make your solution more engaging and adaptable. And the thought there is, making sure that users have ways to see their own progress and that they get recognized for the work they do, which will make them want to use your solution. As long as you don't overdo it. I mean, nobody needs to see confetti every time they save a record or anything, but making sure that those things are there. And probably the first bullet point is really the one of the keys of, making sure that you are providing people with dashboards and ways to understand the work that they're doing, so they don't just feel like they're entering a bunch of records and then they don't know what happens to them after that until the end of the quarter, when suddenly they either get a bonus or they don't, and they don't know why, right? So, and then adaptable. So app life cycle management, the first bullet point there is another one that, just stop using change sets and org-based development. We have some tools now that are available. DevOps Center, which I think is still in beta, but it's an open beta, so I think anybody can use it. But and then packaging, obviously, if you can use things like unlock packages. I know that's going to depend on the maturity of your organization itself, and if your IT teams are actually ready to use something that's that advanced. But still, DevOps Center is better than change sets. And one of the things that we're really recommending is, instead of org-based development, you should be using a source code repository. So, make sure that that you're storing your changes in GitHub or a central location like that, as opposed to just in sandbox orgs. And then composability. So, make sure that as you're building your system, you're not just building monoliths, that you've got everything in one massive flow. You've got things that are kind of functional units that are specific operations, and they kind of manage their own state. That can then, there's a layer of interoperability where they can work together and communicate with each other. And then on top of that, then they can be packaged. And then, like we said, then the packages can be deployed into one org or maybe multiple orgs. If you've got an org strategy that involves more than one org, and you need some similar functionality in more than one place. And you can learn more about Salesforce Well-Architected. I'm actually happy to pull it up. I had put this for in-person presentations where it wasn't easy to just pull it up on the screen, but let me do this. So you can do this. So we can actually take a look at it here. So like I said, if you go to architect.salesforce.com and just click get started, we've got our overview. So this is kind of the outline that I went through, and every one of these, I'm just going to scroll down and pick one of these out of this table, but you can see that the further you drill in, so, trusted, easy, adaptable are the kind of the three top layers. If I pick one of these, we've talked about automation quite a bit. It's a lot of text that's going to tell you, and a lot of information here that'll tell you, here's how you should be thinking about it. Here's why it's important to a business. Here's why it's important to you as an architect and why you need to think about it. And then it gets divided down further into specific topic areas where we'll talk about, again, here's what this means, but it's prescriptive guidance of here's how you should be thinking about this as an architect. And what I really like is if we scroll down a little bit further, we're going to get to patterns and anti-patterns. So every page in Well-Architected will have a table, actually multiple tables like this, where you've got a list of patterns, which are things that you should be able to physically see in an org. So if you look in your org and you see the things on the left side of the table over here, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing, and kudos for building something that's well architected. If you see anything that's in the anti-patterns column, and maybe this is something that that you built, or maybe it's something that somebody else built before you, more than likely, because a lot of times as architects, we don't have the luxury of having greenfield systems. We have to come in and figure out, untangle somebody else's work that might not even be working at the organization we're working with anymore. But the idea is, if you do come across these, it's something you need to rethink. And we're hoping that you'll be able to use some of these tables and some of this guidance as something that you can go back to business stakeholders and say, hey, you know what? Before we build anything else and create more technical debt, this is the official Salesforce recommendation, is not to do this thing that we can clearly see that we're doing in this org. So we need more time before we rush into building something, or whatever it is. But it's something that you'll be able to use to kind of back yourself up when you're saying, we don't want to create more technical debt by doing this, and here's the official guidance. And then down at the bottom of each of these, we've got some tools and resources. So tools are things that you can physically use within your org, and either you have to install. Some of them are paid, some of them are just things that are available in your org that you might not have known about. Links to the documentation about them, and then where they specifically apply. And then if I scroll down a little bit further, we've also got resources, which are things that are more like links to documentation, links to blog posts, or any other white papers, things that might have some additional best practices guidance that go even beyond what's even in Well-Architected. So all of the pages are laid out like that. And with that, I think the next slide was just a Q&A slide. So if anybody does have any questions, would love to continue the conversation.
Anybody have any questions in the room?
I'll break the ice. As an architect, what is, I guess, your biggest challenge when you come into an org?
What was sorry?
So the question was, as an architect, what is the biggest challenge when you go into a new org?
When you go into a new org? Oh,
like a new opportunity, not like a freshly built org.
like a greenfield, so completely new from scratch?
An existing org. So what do you do when you join a new job? By the way, Brian's been in a new job for 2 months. And
I think
an architect.
the biggest challenge there is doing all the untangling of what's already been built and understanding the business processes and any decisions that have been made previously. Hopefully there's some documentation you can use that'll guide you through that, but a lot of times there isn't. And, that's why we're recommending creating some so that the person who comes after you will have a better experience. But I think that the biggest challenge there, though, is, understanding what are the current challenges that are facing the business, and what are any gaps that they have that your business stakeholders think that they would like to be able to do, but they feel like the system can't do it, or there was something that wasn't designed the right way. And then peeling back all the layers and trying to untangle, why it's working the way that it's working is probably the biggest challenge. So.
Hey, so this is Brian. How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
Doing well. Real quick, HubSpot's kind of popping up, right? So as an architecture aspect, are you looking at your competition and how they're actually doing relative to what you're doing?
Yes. And that's an interesting, so there's safe harbor. I can tell you that, yes, we are looking at some of the things that HubSpot's doing. And I know that, one of the things that's nice about HubSpot is that they kind of are like an all-in-one solution especially for smaller organizations. And it's not as complicated, at least today, to architect a HubSpot solution, because they do come with a lot of built-in functionality that in one platform. Versus Salesforce, that's kind of grown over the years, where if anybody was an architect back 10 years ago, and you only had to deal with the core platform, and you only had a limited number of custom objects that you could make, and the functionality that you could add was really limited compared to what you can do today. You can do almost anything you want as far as building automations, connecting to other Salesforce clouds, connecting to other systems, but that also adds complexity, right? And HubSpot, I have usually what you see, it's kind of the life cycle of products, where they go through, they start out where they are really simple, and then over time they get more and more complex to architect as they add additional functionality. But we are looking to simplify some things within the platform. I can tell you that much.
And also, when it comes to HIPAA and PCI, how's that within the architecture framework within the HIPAA aspect?
Have you seen data classifications by any chance within Salesforce? So that is actually something that you might want to look into. And we mentioned it in, there is a place in Well-Architected that we talk about that a little bit. And if you look in compliance, so data classifications allow you to identify if an object or a field, or if something is actually considered to be like personal health information, or personally identifiable information, and you can actually handle it differently, because you can identify what it is within the platform, and then you can set up automations and things to handle that type of data differently.
And then one last question.
Wait, can I?
I know I'm making a salad. You want any more salad?
Real quick. So I focus in healthcare, and Salesforce itself technically is not HIPAA compliant. It's enforcing the policies and procedures of the organization. And then you use Shield and also your native to encrypt PHI. So Salesforce will never ever say it's HIPAA compliant, because they can't. They got to give you the tools for it, and then your attorneys, your company will enforce that. I just had to jump in. Sorry, it's like my.
No, no, thanks. And that is a good point. We out of the box, I think exactly what you said. We give you the tools to make your solution compliant, and that includes classifications, encryption, and anything else that you might need to protect data the way that you need to protect it.
One last question. I know you guys closed $100 million insurance deal not too long ago. When it comes to the architecture, do you actually change the architecture for that company? I'm just curious.
So the underlying architecture is the same across, for all of our customers. And then we provide the tools that will allow them to configure configure their own layer, like their application layer of architecture.
I'm done.
Steve Loper, what is related to platform events beyond streaming monitor and Workbench? What do you recommend for monitoring?
For monitoring. So there are some, so there's like event monitoring, and there are some other logging tools that that you can look at that are third parties, but and I know Shield comes with a monitor, but if you're looking to do your own monitoring where you kind of design your own logging and everything, I've been recommending platform events for a while to use for something like that.
Sorry, for monitoring of platform events.
Oh, yeah, I would look into like some of the tools that are maybe available with Shield and like Event Monitor.
Other questions?
Um,
Can you hear me? Louder. I'll come closer. Yeah. I'm not sure if this question is just because I'm not an architect,
Sure.
but I'm a product manager. But I was just wondering if there's like a certain point, because I've ran across this in a couple large organizations where like you just know it should be custom metadata over an object model.
yeah.
I see people struggle with that, even in large companies. So I just like to get your opinion on that.
Where you know it should be custom metadata versus, you mean like storing information in records, or?
Yeah, like creating a complex custom object model.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that actually is one of our recommendations in our framework is, you know, you shouldn't be using records for customizations and settings in your system. So it should be custom metadata. And there's honestly, I would be surprised if anybody could come up with a legitimate scenario where you would use record data to customize. I know it's easier to build it that way, and there are, like, to your point, there are probably a lot of existing orgs that have that. But our recommendation is to use custom metadata for that. And I think if your instinct is that you feel like you just know that that's the right way to do it, you're actually right. And hopefully what we'll be able to do is you'll be able to refer back to the framework and use that to back yourself up if you have to have any discussions about that with stakeholders.
Thank you.
Character limits with custom metadata. Okay, that's a fair call. And then somebody else Keith had actually asked, will there be tooling to assist migrating process builders to flow triggers in the near term? I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I can actually check with our product team and see if I can find out and I can get that answer back to you.
Yeah, I think it's in the roadmap for 23, but I don't remember which release it's in, Tom.
Yeah.
But having, I think, in beta either spring or summer to be able to convert those process builders to flows.
Yeah.
And we'll see when it goes GA. Somebody posted the roadmap in LinkedIn a few weeks ago, so I got to go get it.
Yeah.
What did you do?
What factors do we base on to recommend an archiving strategy? So this is actually this could almost be a discussion by itself, but I'll tell you that.
What was the question, Tom?
What factors do we use to recommend an archiving strategy? You could almost have an entire data architecture session where we talk about archiving and backup and everything. But I can tell you the way that I've normally recommended this in the past, and before I was in the role now that I was in now, I was working directly for customers and with customers. And whenever I would work on an archiving strategy, it was always the way that I would recommend it is to think of your data as hot, warm, and cold. Your hot data is data that are records that you still need to modify. You still need to view at the record level in your reports. You know, aggregates are not enough. You need to go down to the detailed level. Those obviously will need to stay in your Salesforce org and your production system for as long as you need them to be like that. And then your warm data is data that maybe you don't need to see things at the record level, but you do need to still see aggregates in your reports, or, you need to be able to add things up. And what you can do there is you can build maybe a custom object to calculate the aggregates, or, whatever you need to do to keep those in your system, or put the aggregates in if you've got a separate, Tableau system or something like that, a reporting system. But you can generally you can take those records out and put them in an archive. Either it's a data warehouse or it's some type of system that's off platform, where you can remove the records to number one, save up storage space, and then potentially make it easier, make performance improvements if it'll help eliminate things like data skew. But you have those records in a place where you can still get them and you can still retrieve them if you need to. And if you do need to pull one back and you say, oops, I made a mistake, I need this record in my org after all, it's still easy enough to pull them back in. And then your cold records are records that are so old that they're not even valuable to keep in your reports, to have in your reports anymore, because they'll actually skew your reports in the wrong way, and they'll misrepresent something. And those you want to put, you can either completely purge them, or if you have some type of legal reason why, I've worked in public sector before, and like Freedom of Information Act says you have to keep records for 30 years, for example, where even if maybe the records aren't still valuable to you as an organization, you have to be able to retrieve them. And then for that, there are actually tools like AWS Glacier, where you can put the records there, and maybe it's going to take a little bit longer to retrieve them, but you can if you need to. And that's the way that I recommend it, kind of at a high level. Like I said, I can talk about this stuff. That could be its own session, but just for the quick answer to that one, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Tom. And I know that will definitely be one of the topics we'll cover sometime in 2013.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of that in my particular org right now.
Awesome.
By the time we're done, we'll probably either purge, archive, or just remove, for various reasons, about 2 billion records. And so definitely it's a very, very large undertaking. And like you said, this would probably be a couple sessions talking about how to come up with your strategy, then what to implement for purging, archiving. There's lots of really great third-party tools. I might get Own Backup to come in and talk to us about it, because I like their tool. And there's other vendors.
Yeah. They would be a great group to talk about that with. And the thing is, it's going to vary from organization to organization and industry to industry based on, what you need to do, there might be, like I said, legal requirements, regulatory things, but but at a high level, that is the recommendation. And then, and the other thing that's interesting to think about, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, is I have worked with a lot of customers that kind of have this, well, we need to just keep everything for as long as we can. And you're actually, in addition to potentially creating performance issues in your system, you're also potentially exposing your data to, malicious, if somebody is able to gain unauthorized access to your systems. Now they've got a lot more records that they've got a lot bigger surface area of data that they can exploit, versus if you purge it and put it somewhere where it's encrypted off platform and you only retrieve it if you absolutely need to. It's actually it's safer that way too. So strategy guideline or advice for architects when an org is migrated to Hyperforce. This is a good one, and I have a feeling this is going to come up more often over in the coming months as more and more orgs get migrated to Hyperforce. So officially, the everything in Hyperforce is backwards compatible, and supposedly the migrations they happen behind the scenes, and you're not going to know about it. That it even there might be a small amount of downtime. The reality is, check your integrations, check your data, go through and have a plan to regression test everything and make sure it's all working, and contact support. But it's supposed to be pretty seamless. And I know that we've got some tools that are available that I just saw at Dreamforce to do some migration of some automations, which I'm not clear on how those specifically work or what they're for, but I would double check that, but it's supposed to be fairly seamless from what I've heard. So
So I have a question. In your architecture blueprint, if you will, do you have any, or do you recommend any kind of frameworks? You know, I know I've got my favorites for triggers and things like that, but you know, around flows where you can actually, you know, can turn off all the automations, or you know, basically master kill switch, so you turn off all automations, you know, to do some data loader or things like that. Is there any recommendations or any frameworks that are recommended?
so we don't recommend a specific framework, but we do recommend using a framework like you said. And I don't know if anybody's worked in the education or nonprofit industry and seen like TDTM, which is table-driven trigger management, which does exactly what you said. So it basically, as long as you are using the framework correctly, it'll put all of your triggers into a table that you can then go in almost like just configuration and turn on or off, turn which ones you want to use on or off, or you can disable all of them for some, if you need to for some reason. And there are, you know, that one I'm using off the top of my head because I came from Salesforce.org, was in my previous role at Salesforce, but there are a lot of similar frameworks like that if you're using a lot of triggers, you definitely should be putting them in a framework like that.
Right, and that's basically, you know, how I do it in triggers. But what I found too is that it's kind of turning off triggers, but not being able to turn off your flows, process builders, workflows, all that kind of stuff, which obviously, you know, soon will not be anything but just flows. But if you can't turn off the flows, then you run the risk of now you're doing half of what your automations are supposed to do. And
Yeah.
More dangerous than turning off the triggers and leaving the flows on. And so it's more around a process that would basically say all automations, including flows, you know, online flows would have to adopt the same type of methodology of a feature switch or a trigger switch to turn them off as well.
Yeah, earlier we talked about custom metadata. Monica Sandberg has some really great presentations about flows. She's done custom metadata for all the flows, turn them on and off by the user, by the flow, by the type. Hopefully she'll be speaking to us in February or March next year about all her items, which is really good about it. But definitely you should have a bypass switch on all your flows and process builders. But the way she's done it for custom metadata is very ingenious. I like it.
What's your name again?
Sandberg.
Yeah, custom metadata is great for that's a great use case for custom metadata. And the other thing I've seen, which I don't think is quite as elegant, is a master flow with a bunch of subflows that if you turn off the master flow, it'll none of the subflows will execute. But custom metadata gives you more flexibility of, like you said, by user, by type, or you know, you can come up with a variety of different scenarios that will then determine if a flow should or shouldn't execute, or if you just want to shut it off by you know, by taking an action yourself to prevent an automation from firing.
And if you happen to be going to Florida Dreaming in a couple weeks, she'll be speaking about it then as well. So, other questions? Comments?
Give me a comment.
Sure.
We're talking about documentation, especially when you're stepping into an org that, you know, somebody else is working on. One of my pet peeves is going into a flow and trying to reverse engineer it, because even though I can say I want to get records and then use the element name, people are still, you know, custom doing all their little variables. And the challenge with that is you got to keep reverse it. Okay, where'd you get it? Where'd you, you know, it's very hard to find and follow the flow. Whereas if it, you know, if the element up here is mentioning the element name dot user ID, I know where it's coming from. And so I don't have to open up a whole bunch of objects to visually watch a flow and get an idea of what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
I didn't see that in, like, from your documentation or recommendation, but it's something for me that I really like.
Oh,
Like in conventions or what's
Yeah, so I want to say, you know, get contacts, so it's the get record. So get contacts that have an automobile. So that's the element name. And in there, I want to get the ID and I want to get their email address and their phone number. Years ago, you had to create variables for each one you have to capture. Well, now you don't.
You know, yeah.
Bring in the whole record. And a lot of people go, well, I don't want to bring the whole record in because I'm only using 2 fields instead of 100. But if you say bring it all in, when you go into debug mode, if I've only asked, you know, I want to say get records and bring all the fields in, when I go into debug mode, and you can see that it's only grabbing the ID. And then later in an element, I want to use the email address. When you run debug mode and go back, now it's grabbing the ID and the email address. So even though you said grab all the records, it's actually not creating a performance hit from my understanding.
Yeah.
But now
Yeah.
I know that it is get customers with an automobile.user ID. I know exactly where everything is coming from, and I don't have to look at variables and where is it used, and it's just, I hate it.
Yeah.
How do you really feel?
I know, but it would be my recommendation to add that as a best practice from the documentation standpoint.
That's a good technique, and I'll maybe share that with our product team manager for our product manager for Flow and see if it might make sense to put that somewhere in either our documentation or the product documentation for sure.
I did want to throw something else in too. I was going to comment earlier, but then I think you answered off on a question from online. One of the questions about, you know, the tools to convert process builders and workflows to flows, kind of the mindset or my direction I kind of give clients is rather than using an automated tool to convert it, we're kind of recommending that is the time to go back and look at it. And, you know, because a lot of times these things are there and it's technical depth, it's not necessary anymore. As things have progressed, you know, it may have been a process builder, but now we also have a flow in process. And so is converting that process builder or workflow into a flow really the right step? If you already have a trigger in place, then let's get rid of it all together and just add the logic or add the field to be updated into the trigger. So everything should really be looked at holistically and to see, is there really need to convert this to flow? And it's just to keep everything in together. And if there is already an automation that it could be where it makes sense to move it into, then that's kind of our recommendation rather than just doing a global, let's convert everything into a flow from the process flow.
And that makes sense. We had 4 workflow rules that were doing the same thing as a before save trigger. We're actually going to convert them both to before save flow, right? So we're going to take it out of the trigger, turn off the workflow rules, because that way it's still one automation, it's being touched once. But like you said, looking at everything that exists is a really good idea because you might be replicating the function somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the you know, the difficulties of that is, especially when there's no documentation to these technical items. And then, like Ronnie said, I'm only like 2 months in within my current role, and it's just like when something breaks, my head wants to pop. It's like I don't know where to go, and you know, part of it is just because I don't know the processes yet, right? And so it's a very good point to revisit and say, is it even worth recreating this, right? Especially like with workflow rules, process builders, notorious for causing a lot of issues. And then you get into classes and triggers where you have dependencies and try to map that out. That you need a whole room like this to try to get that sorted. And so to me, I like to take that approach that you said, but it's putting a lot of focus in like really trying to map out all these processes and how they interact and how often has it been used, to try to find a quick way of saying, oh, we don't need this, versus spending weeks trying to dig in and research this.
But at some point, whether
You have to.
Yeah, exactly. At some point, you're gonna have to look at it and know what your process does. And if you don't know now, yes, you have to go out and look at it and document it and say, yes, this is, this is unneeded, or we're basically duplicating it here or whatever. At that point, it's documented, and then you're good to go in the future. But if you just continue to just convert it, and management's notorious about saying, well, we don't have time to look at it, so let's just go out and just keep adding on the tech debt, and basically 10 years down the road, something comes along, and now you're gonna have to go out and reverse engineer it at that point. So all you've done is kick the can down the road.
It's a tricky situation.
Exactly.
We
that
use
is a
that
problem.
for different purposes, like we and we use to create our technical help. So out of 18, we have 7 workflows which are really useful now. So we use this option of migration as single web and then workflows, which we don't use. Of the tools which they really use.
Yeah.
And for bigger somewhere else. What we build it, try to make it
Exactly. Well, and everything.
I think there was some idea to give you an opportunity to
So I have a
reassess,
question
right?
regarding permissions and security. Back in those days, Salesforce suggested to use the most permissive permission using setting the org-wide default as private. And basing on that, larger organizations like ours, they set the OWD as private and use hundreds of sharing rules, public rules, permission sets, which is very, very hard to manage now. So
Yeah.
now we can turn back and set our org-wide default as public read only. So how do you suggest to update that? That's really a big challenge to us.
Yeah, and that's actually why we made that recommendation, because exactly the scenario you described, where you've got hundreds of sharing rules that a lot of them probably overlap with each other. A lot of them, some of them, same thing with the automations. Like after they've been there for a while, you might not even really know what the purpose of these are anymore. And I think one of the challenges is if you've already got all of those in place, it's going to still it's going to be carefully undoing them and making sure, like before you just go and set everything to public, that you don't have records or you don't have data that's suddenly going to become available to people that shouldn't be able to see it. But yeah, it's probably the best thing to do is start by creating like a security matrix that where you've got a list of all of your personas down the list, like a spreadsheet. And if you imagine column A has a list of all your personas, and then across the top, you've got all the list of all of the things that somebody could do or could access within your org. And then the intersection of each of those, you decide whether or not that person should, that persona should have access or not. And then from there, you can decide if it's okay to switch and to remove some of those sharing rules. And actually, if you look at Well-Architected at Secure, and you scroll down to the resources section, we actually have a template for a security matrix that you can use that'll help you get started doing exactly that and mapping out your what everyone should have access to. And then from there, once you have that all mapped out well enough that you feel comfortable making the decision, then you can go forward, obviously, and test it in a sandbox and everything first before you do it in production. But
I would treat that as an epic with a lot of stories and
Yeah.
play out, years, forward, because to your point, and we have a similar problem with roles and hierarchy, where we basically don't have any. And so, that's one of the tasks that we need to do is shift to a role hierarchy. But we can't just go, full blown, hey, tomorrow we're switching everything. Well, we're gonna have to phase it out, and try to target, one role, maybe a few roles at a time, so that, if things go haywire, we have a quick rollback option, right? Versus, having to roll back everything is gonna be a more involved process. So it's a very complicated process that I think I would, at least, and again, this is something that we're gonna have to tackle. We're
Yeah.
trying to have it out, one role at a time. The highest, used role, possibly, or maybe that's from the smallest to the highest. so that there's less impact, and then we can kind of get comfortable with it and get more creative and confident. But yeah, it's technical debt. It stinks. I was gonna say a different word, but I'll keep it easy.
Just a question. I'm slightly off camera, so you're just gonna have to hear me. On the topic of object permissions and, you know, the proposed default of public read, that gives me the heebies, right? If I was to talk with our compliance or security folks, they would go, you're starting in the wrong place. And if my answer is it's because performance or it's because management, they would ask me why I picked that tool, right? So knowing that there's a bit of a cottage industry and helping to unwind some of these things or show some of these things in a more useful way to compliance folks and auditors and whatnot, are there any new tools or processes coming down the pike to help articulate, you know, how a constellation of sharing rules and everything else is, you know, boils down for different personas in the system?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I can specifically answer that, but I do know we have a product manager that is specifically handles our authorizations, and she came from a very large customer where she had to deal with a lot of the same issues that we've just been talking about with the last couple of questions. Cheryl Feldman is her name. You may have actually even seen her present. And I know she's working on tools to make it a lot easier for people to do things like what you're describing. So I don't know of anything that are specifically on our roadmap or anything, but I'll definitely take that as something to follow up and see.
Yeah, and I think from a topic perspective, right, talking about restriction rules might be
Yes.
something very new in the last 3 releases. Scoping rules do not restrict access, in case you've heard that. They're very different. But that's another topic that we can talk about. How do you build a proper role hierarchy? How do you use sharing rules, restriction rules, and those kind of things? So again, and I think there are some objects that make perfect sense to make public, right? I know in my own environment, brand, you know what my brands are, that does not matter.
Right.
You can definitely argue it should not be an object, but that's a whole
Yeah.
different-
That's different. Yeah.
Also dynamic page layouts,
But definitely, we can put that on the topic list for just how do we handle security and access to records, because I know we're all dealing with it one way or another, regardless of your role. It's like who can see what data is an important topic.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll add too is if you look at the I mean, we did add the caveat of if you have a reason that something should be private, obviously make it private. And if you have to create extra sharing rules for that, it is what it is. So, but there are a lot of objects that when you really take a step back and think about it, you just gave a perfect example of, is it really going to hurt anybody if this is public and it's public read only? Right?
One thing I was gonna add, that this is more preference, like the gentleman, I guess, was referring to close. When it comes to role hierarchy, it's painful. Because,
Yeah.
you know, going down, you know, that page and trying to find the right role and things like that, like, if they did the guided path that they have for flows for role hierarchy, that might be actually a cool, more interactive experience to interact with the role hierarchy, because it's like, depending on how many roles you have, you know, the classing feature, that might be helpful. It's pretty intimidating, even for the most seasoned.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thanks.
It is kind of fun to go into setup and look at to see what's still classic, because roles is very classic looking. Versus
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely has not seen some love in a while from Salesforce. Those get a lot of love. Other questions or comments? Thank you, everybody, for the discussion.
For platform events, we're looking at a lot. There's a documented way to change who the platform event is running under, because by default it goes under the platform integration user. We had this nasty trigger that would think about it, and it was to try to change the ownership of it, but there was a specific piece of documentation that I'm very specific about. I'm the only person in the org that will go to those 22 orgs and change that, because it's very dangerous on it. With some of those real nice API settings that you have to be able to use Workbench on it, is there any plan to get a UI behind those 'Cause I mean, I love having the power of being the only person that I will absolutely allow do this, but it'd be nice to go in and say, okay, for this platform event trigger, I want this user to be able to do it, because I know for me, it has been problems in the past of, oh crap, somebody forgot to do it. But it's more of like, it's like getting a UI around some of those endpoints that we call in Workbench. It would be helpful. If you guys want to know that little trick, talking at the class business saved a lot of code on that. But I guess the question is there any architecture roadmap for those behind the scenes API calls to get it so that it can be done by an admin rather than that word salad.
Yeah, no, that I'm not sure about, but that is a good, yeah. I'm not sure of anything off the top of my head that is on the roadmap, but I can see why that would definitely be useful. So let me see that. Let me take that feedback back as well.
And the only reason why we do it in the org is because it's a well-documented feature, and because we didn't want to go, oh, let's see if this works, and the ethic breaks. But it's a documented feature in Salesforce that you can change the owner of the specific trigger on that.
Oh yeah.
Salesforce recently invested in platform events APIs, right? That's very new. So I don't know what else they have in the roadmap, and I have not read about that. But
Yeah.
like, you can probably create some sort of managed package that lets people do that.
I mean, maybe they're gonna be hired Salesforce.
Yeah, you can just have a whole new revenue stream.
With sharing in classes and the platform integration. I know in the past when we were using the bot, and this is in a strict Oregon area where like, using without sharing was like taboo, but we had to in order to get this out. It was during COVID and like get it done. But we created something with that with the people doing it. And there's some hacks that you can do in Salesforce where you can like change the URL and get to the option settings.
Classic.
Yeah, correct. And so like, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, but like, so it'd be nice, like the site user, like all these types of different users, not the bot user, I forget, with the automated user, like we should have a bit more control there, because sometimes, like I remember having to give access to a class to that user through a hack to fix a problem, and like if you didn't like blow your mind out, like searching for stuff online, you'd never find it.
I got a lot of job security because I know those things, but it's like you want to be able to go, okay, admin, here's what I need you to do, and then be able to, and it's even metadata deployable, so it can move from lower orgs, or I'm sorry, I'm incorrect on that. It is not metadata deployable, so it has to be done.
Well, I live in Florida and I want to enjoy the beach. So,
Well, here's the thing, right? We always talk about, don't you want to win the lottery? And then when you win the lottery, who's going to take over your role? So it would be nice for you to just go relax and do something. Even if that's something that's out
I
there.
gotta get that managed package now.
Yeah, yeah.
we'll promote it.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
Marley, I wonder if one of your meetings should be nothing but war stories.
Oh, yeah.
And then like have like a trophy for whoever has the worst war story of them all from architecting. That would be a fun day. A lot of drinking, but that'd be fun.
So definitely we'll have more alcohol, but so we had one today where something broke and then magically it fixed itself. And I'm pretty sure it's something under the covers in Salesforce with some skinny table that they hadn't indexed properly, right? No, but it came to us. But it gets better because I dig into it. I'm like, oh, look, this query is 63 lines long.
Oh,
And that's just the subquery that we're going to append something else to. And I'm like, oh, this is ugly. I need to work on this. It's really what highlighted today's, I guess.
I think that was a combination of Salesforce, but also just the old architecture of the application, sending more.
My first question is, what do we deploy? Can we roll back? And the answer was nothing. Okay, Salesforce, what did you do? Was my path thinking there, right? So, but yeah, no, definitely, there's always room for improvement in technical debt. But yeah, war stories would be fun.
And that was where my mind just wanted to pop. And I'm like, where do I start with this?
I do want to tell everybody, so I've worked with Brian in a couple of companies. I have fired him twice because of one of those war stories. So you never know what happens. It didn't stick because the paperwork's too much work. But
And it was during COVID, people were on vacation. Hey, I bring stuff and I feel something. I'm a talented. That's how you know. No, not that bad.
No, we have pretty good rules about not doing things in production.
I'm pretty strict there. I think.
More
between
because
Marie
we've
and-
learned, right? We've learned how painful it is to do that. It's like, no, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna let anybody else in your team do that. That is a big no. So, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Tom, for everything and the questions. I love the discussion. I'm gonna move on a little bit because I want to ask you guys some questions. So I've talked to a lot of you guys. I know a lot of you guys for many years. Thank you everybody for being here. So quick question. How many people here are over 10 years of sales experience? All right, between 5 and 10? Okay. 2 and 5, a couple years. All right, and who's brand new, whatever you consider yourself to be brand new to Salesforce? Welcome. It's awesome.
Yay, you're
What's the
there.
hashtag? There you go.
And I wanted to share with you guys, my goal for this group is really for us to talk about what makes a good architect, regardless of your title or experience. I don't care about titles, I never have. 2009, Jesse came to me and said, hey, do you want to learn this thing called Salesforce? And I said, sure, what is it? Now we're here. I kind of drank the Kool-Aid, right? And so titles don't mean anything to me. If you have any questions, there are no dumb questions. There are no things you need to worry about, right? We're all a really great, helpful people. Like I said at the very beginning, there's so many of you guys that helped me put this together. I just coordinated it and I very much threw it against the wall and it's stuck. So thank you so much for showing up and for all your help. You guys have been awesome. I have another question for you guys about location. And for me, this is a convenient location. I'm about 15, 20 minutes away from here, ignoring the food fiasco that I had earlier, but I'm not going to share that. How was the drive? Anybody here drive more than 30 minutes today? Okay, Brock, you work here, so you cannot raise your hand.
Hey, these sometimes
Your
easier.
footwork.
He does work remote almost every day, so he did have to drive a long way. Thank you, Brock. And so there were only a few that were over 35. So the reason I'm asking is, and I think I was talking to William, I lost William. I like to meet here. I worked here for 13 years. I don't work here anymore, but I still have lots of friends and connections. So thank you again. But I know I've had offers for meetings in Lake Mary, downtown, Kissimmee. And so one of the things that I'm looking at is just locations. So if anybody has any preference, just reach out to me and let me know what works. I love seeing everybody here. And if Jesse lets me have it again here in November, we'll have it again here in November, and then we'll figure out the rest of the year, right? December will probably something really relaxed, and next year we'll see what's going on. Are there any topics? I know today we talked about data topics, sharing topics. What else do you guys want to hear about? What's important to you? Flows, I already said Monica's gonna, I love Monica. I love all the stuff that she's done, so I want her to present for us. What else is of interest to you guys?
Other than storage usage, I want to restrict the spam regarding email to case and web to case.
Email to
Salesforce
case
don't
could
have
probably be
any
its own
solution.
topic on its own. Yeah. Yep. Case management when it comes to inbound cases is a good one. What else?
Load
Security.
load testing and the sales with DX would be used here. So, I don't know if I'm thinking of that Salesforce thinking, but like what's your deployment methodology?
And so I really want to invite a couple different just vendors and have them tell us what their story is, right? Right now, we're talking to a few. Somebody has a Kapata Cup. There's somebody over there. There's Metazoa, there's Flowsome, there's a few others, right? And I'll be completely transparent. Those of you guys that know me, you know I always am. I'm going to ask them to sponsor a meeting because we're a community group, right? And if they want to tell us about their tools, we want to learn and they can help us out, right? Chi, what do you have?
There's a counter.
I love it.
I love Conga. Conga's a great
I
tool.
had a Conga issue and the Conga person that called me out, she's like, where do you live? I Googled you. And she's like, I think we live in the same town. And I was like, yeah. She's like, where do you live in that town? She's like, I'm here to meet outside and have the rest of the meeting outside.
That's awesome. No, and like,
It was really cool.
I use Own Backup and I can demo it to you guys and I'll make sure I don't show you anything that I'm not supposed to write from my org and that kind of thing. But there's other tools like Own Backup and I would love to invite either of you guys to use them for you guys to share what you've learned. Again, war stories, right? What's good, what's bad. And or if we have vendor ideas that want to come and share information. So
Hey, Marlene, can you add to the list API integration? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
So can you add API integration?
I'm really not making this up. I have to find that mentee group that I signed up for. This is the only one who signed up for. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Have fun with your mentees.
I'm more interested in making your video on YouTube on this chat. I found the template
Can you like diagrams?
diagram. And I remember vividly one of video when you eat on video, how bad architect is that. So I would love to have more hands-on.
That's another really good one, right? How many of you guys have access to Lucid Chart now? About 20%. Draw.io. It's a free one. It's actually a very powerful tool. It's very free. It's very nice. Obviously Visio, we probably all have an office somewhere. Tom?
I was going to say, if you can actually, you mentioned Lucid Chart, you can get a free account, but if one other thing, if I can share my screen again really quick, if you want to, speaking of diagrams.
Yeah. Yeah, because I actually do have the free account from Lucid Chart, but the 3 diagrams kind of stop me.
Yeah, we have a diagramming framework that we go through how to build Salesforce diagrams. And actually, if you look at the Salesforce Architects YouTube channel, there's a bunch of videos that Susanna and I did that walk through how to use our framework. And then we've got this template gallery that has all of our data, well, most of our data models, not all of them yet, but we're working on getting all of them. And as well as a bunch of other diagram templates that you can use for different type of architecture diagrams. And if you do have a Lucid Chart account, you can click this link and it'll open the template in Lucid Chart, and then it'll give you the ability, so then you can take this diagram and modify it for whatever your own business is. And if you look on the architect website, there's a whole bunch of resources that you can use. And like I said, you can even do this. I think if you have a free Lucid Chart account, there's limited to what you can do with the templates, but you can open them all in Lucid Chart even with the free one.
What are the 2 new diagramming applications you're working with? It was announced during Dreamforce and I'm forgetting what they were aside from Lucid Chart.
Yeah, Miro and Elements Cloud. And there'll be more information about those to come in probably the next couple months or so, but we're hoping to actually roll that out. And so then coming back here, our long-term goal is, instead of just having an open and Lucid Chart link, we'll just have links where you can almost open it into any diagramming tool of your choice. And then you'll be able to use any of our templates and use them with whatever diagramming tool you use. So.
Is Health Cloud in there?
I don't think Health Cloud is in there yet.
I don't know if Health Cloud is. I think some of the functionality of Health Cloud might be in it, but I don't think the entire Health Cloud is yet. Yeah. But you can check back. We keep adding new ones almost every month. So if you don't see what you're looking for, check back and it'll hopefully be there soon.
Tina, you mentioned API integration. What does that mean? What are you looking for?
Best practices. Which one is preferred for which use cases and best practices involved.
And so I just did that certification earlier this year in March, and it's kind of funny because if you go through the Trailhead module, it gives you a link to what we call the integration Bible. And it says it'll take you 1 hour to go through it. I think it's a 98-page PDF.
That's 1 hour.
So it's a little more than 1 hour, but a lot of the patterns are in there and it's really good, right? But integrations are, you definitely want to, and it's funny when you're reading like, oh, look, all the anti-patterns. Yep, that's what we're doing. But it's really great information to see it before you start to build the APIs.
You come out the API trailhead, it's like a recent bookmark that one.
It's in the module. If you look at it, it's got, I don't remember what it's called. I can.
No,
can send
I
it.
think I know what you're talking about.
But it'll actually say 1 hour and it goes to the HTML version of it. But if you look at the PDF, it's either 68 or 88 pages, which may be off. It's a great application.
The well-known secret Trailhead Live.
Oh, yeah, I
An
know.
hour is multiple hours. And
One
we all know
hour
this,
for
they
that one
lie.
PDF, it was funny.
Super badge, 9 hours.
Yeah,
Really?
You know, it's not, it's just they lie.
So talking about horror stories, there was one super badge that I did. It took me less time than it was supposed to because I did it and it was just one of the easy ones, except that it was testing for the name of a queue without the underscore. Do you know how long it took me to find that? Because it's supposed to be default names. No. And then you just get creative and you start testing, you know, like, I know this answer is right. Why is the test not running? But anyway, let's talk about certifications. Anybody here seeking a certification in the next 6 months? Cool. Yeah, you better like all hands, feet. So IT's Brian, he's been in Salesforce since 2002. Three. And so I teach him a lot. So he knows a lot. He knows more than he gives himself credit for.
But at the time, I should have, you know, to be fair, I should have more certifications. But at the time, they were expensive, and to keep them active, it was $100 a quarter, and I wasn't making a lot of money, and so I wasn't going to do that. They were not reimbursing me for that, and so I've always been at most of my jobs for at least 5 years, maybe longer. So I didn't really need the certification for job security. You know, to your point, I had a lot of experiences from breaking things, but
You know, that's the best way to learn. 'Cause then
but
you
I've
can
built
fix
a
it.
lot of great solutions to compensate. And so like now I'm trying to focus more on let me show what I know by actually getting the certification. And so it's just like, but now I have kids, I have 2 dogs, I like to bike ride, I like to go bowling.
Loves to
So
cook.
it's like I gotta find what's important and
So certifications, right? So anybody here, like, do you guys want to tell me what you're going for, or should I just do raise of hands for a couple of popular ones? Because so
CTA.
technical architect, CTA. So there's a guy back behind you probably want to talk to.
Yeah, that's Diane.
And so, so you have both sides of the pyramid.
The right side of the pyramid, first track that I'm working on. I've one more test taken. But that's,
Which one do you have left?
the top,
Identity?
yes.
That's the one I'm studying for, so we can get together and.
And I have definitely experienced when I put that on my LinkedIn, you know, I'm not looking for a job.
Yeah, yep. And
And
so I got to take it during Dreamforce because it was free and I failed it, which was awesome. I was hoping I would pass it. I'm like, there's some things I just have not done in this application, right? So I failed it, but I know what to study, which is really great. But once I get that, I'll have both sides of the pyramid. But yeah, definitely, there's a lot of people in Orlando that can help. It can be virtual, right? I know she dropped off. Crystal and I meet every once in a while because she also has both sides of the pyramid, right? So there's lots of ways to get the ideas and identity. A lot of times just talking about what you've read helps cement the information. So what other certifications are you guys seeking? I know integrations, architect. What else?
Wait, will anybody else study for that?
I would love to keep going over the material because the fact that you pass a certification, this means you're a good test taker.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty good at it, but I would really like to cement the information better in my brain. So just let me know whenever you're ready to study.
So I'm working on the manufacturing, which is more partner.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's called the cloud, but it's more product focused and
So Tina has this awesome users group.
I'm
It
gonna
means-
hunt after her for Stanford, but I'm like,
And Kathy was behind you.
Well,
So-
one thing I'd recommend is, you know, like you're gonna use Shield.
Don't.
That's an option,
But
but you really need to classify your data. Otherwise, like we were at a point, I'm not a service company, that they apply Shield and we couldn't even download managed packages because they were using common fields, and so it would fail the test passes in the managed packages. But and I'm not getting paid for this, but Home Backup, they actually have a tool which is pretty cool for Shield that you implement that. It's called OB Secure. And that tells you, hey, if you encrypt this, these 4 classes are gonna go bananas, you know, potentially. And so it gives you, it's a feature
an
that
add-on.
they have, Home Backup Secure. And so that gives you a better planning approach to that. And then it helps you with the data classification. So that you can.
you've got own backup. Is that an add-on feature?
It is.
It is an add-on feature, yeah, but it
It's
but
an
it was
add-on.
relatively cheap considering what it does, if I'm being honest.
That
Oh,
gives
yeah,
you
all
your
the-
knock list of this is what's going to fail, what's not.
Well, it'll tell you, you wanna focus testing on this, because it's probably gonna fail. You know, it may fail, may not, but it, based on its algorithms or whatever, it gives you at least, a fighting chance of, of knowing, you know, what's gonna go, you know, haywire, so.
So how many of you guys,
Real quick, with Shield, there's a new product called data, Einstein data detect.
Yep.
That you can build in policies and define classified data. And then it'll even update the fields, update those auditing fields. So that I thought was what made it work, that you find it and update the field.
What is that called?
Einstein data detect, I think it comes with Shield.
yeah, Shield is, and Shield's a percentage of your spend, so that's always interesting. Yes.
Mhm.
So, how many of you guys work on the client org versus consultants, the clients first, client side? Okay,
What do you mean by that?
so do you work for a consulting partner type job? Do you work on multiple orgs for different companies or a single company? And- No, that's still
You have
client
to raise
side.
your hand.
So I don't think we use the house, it's internal, and external. Either you're internal, you work for a company, you get a paycheck from the company, if it says like Humana or Marriott or whatever. You're external, you're a consultant. Not the company or the org that you're working at, but another.
And so how many are on the consultant side? And so out of all of us, how many of us did any prep work for winter release?
Little bit. Now I'll do the
Lies.
half
I
Lies.
read enough to know I wasn't gonna do any work.
So aside from reading or browsing through release notes lightly, did you do any work in your org to prepare for winter 22? So I was thinking. Don't have time.
You have a
to.
time machine.
I was thinking for our next meeting in November, I would like to do a session talking about how to prepare for a release, what tools are out there. And then once you have that, basically building a framework around preparing for releases. What do you guys think about that?
So I'm sorry, can I change my answer about did we prepare or not? We do regression testing every Monday. On the whole full sandwich, so yes, we prepare that.
Nice. Very nice.
Is that gonna go over learning how to read faster?
Brian, I can only help you so much. We work 8 hours a day together. So no, but if
Because
you,
those documents are like 100 pages long.
well, actually, I do have tools that help you go through the release notes faster. So that's really what I was looking at. They
I'm
are,
teasing, but-
I can't throw my phone at you.
No, I
Um,
really like.
there's
that
again.
because I've inherited a team, and that was one of the things that we did a week before, was tell them to pay attention to release notes, critical updates, all of the things that are sunsetting soon. So I'm actually building a process for that. So I definitely want to.
That's
figure out
awesome.
Those tools, and then break up everything between all of my direct reports, and then come back together and say, hey, how are we gonna tackle these things?
That's awesome. So let's talk about that. Maybe we can partner on it. And by the way, if you guys ever want to present whatever you guys are talking about, even if it's just questions, ping me, like we can do it, right? It can be virtual, it can be in person. That's the whole point of getting us together. So you have other people to go talk to. Maybe you're just venting, maybe you just want to drink. Maybe you really want help, right? Definitely, you guys see each other, connect on LinkedIn. You don't have to come to me, but I'm here to facilitate, right? So that's my plan for November. I was thinking for Wednesday instead of Tuesday. Does that affect anybody negatively, or does that sound good?
I think there's gonna be a lot less brain after that session.
I know, for us, it's like, let's see what happens after the release. We did not do any preparation. I'm going to be very transparent there. So I was thinking Wednesday, the 16th is in November. We'll do in person again. I have to harass Jesse about getting the room again. And I'll work on AV to make sure I figure out how to do the audio better, because I know it's possible. That's why this room is here. I know Thursdays is not a possible day, because if I did Thursdays, Brian, when I show up, he always goes bowling.
Maybe virtually, and I'll pause in between shots.
Marlene, I got approval from my bosses, if you guys would like to
You don't wanna
use
be
the
on
office
hold.
as
Thank you.
well. And Wednesdays
Might
actually
be.
works perfect, because Wednesday, everybody's remote. So we guys have a whole entire office to utilize if you guys want to use it, just like this.
Awesome. And
As
so,
part of- Sorry, as part of your planning for release discussion, one thing that we got caught on is that we developed in the sandbox, which gets updated first
and then you were an API too early, weren't you?
and couldn't deploy to production for a week or a week and a half because
Yep.
it failed.
Yep.
So something like
That's a good point.
There's fun trip up areas, experience cloud versus other things, trip up on API stuff and really exciting things. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that stuff.
Yeah,
Or
well,
that flow that you deployed, and like, why is it working? Or like the validation, and it's because it's on, you know, just before you try to do that validation, it switched to the latest API.
I would definitely tell you, you should go look at your critical updates tomorrow because you need time to test those, make any changes before the next release. Right, like there's a list there that tells you this is going to be auto activated for you at this date. So look at that. So we'll do that on November 16th. I already have saved the date on our group. So if you want to go sign up RSVP, I'll put more details on it. And then I have one last question and then I'll stop quizzing you guys because thank you so much for your feedback. Is anybody interested in a career fair type meeting?
Can you expand on
Doing
that?
something we don't want to do though.
So in a couple of weeks, Tina and I are going to be doing a presentation at Florida Dreaming about our career paths, which is going to be lots of fun. We've been doing prep for that, right? And it's always fun to hear people's opinions about how long you should stay at a job. And so there's some career fair things about that we can do, just general career advice, I don't care, resume review, all that kind of stuff, right? Out of everybody here, sorry, I'm gonna ask one question. How many people here have ever interviewed to hire somebody else? There's a lot of people that can give you feedback there, right? What kind of questions do they ask? What are they looking for? Why do they care about that particular question, right? So we can do that kind of thing. We could also ask a couple of local recruiters to come in and talk to us about what they have available, right? So that's why I was asking. Obviously, I want everybody to be very comfortable, and if you guys are ready for it, that's awesome. And if not, you just let me know, and then we'll do it sometime next year or skip it. Sound good?
And where they're gonna take you out to lunch from that week.
No?
Let's keep Brian.
No, yeah. No,
So I'd
anyway.
like to jump in really quick and say, thank you, Marlene, for doing this. We need this tonight.
Submitted an application for this group back in May after I got poked and prodded a couple of times by Tina. So you did. So thank you. And then it did take a little while to get approved. I harassed some of my Salesforce partners to get this approved, and they got it done. So thank you. And again, thank you for everything. Thank you for your time, Tom. I know I reached out to you on Thursday of last week, and you made yourself available, which is pretty awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks, everyone. This was great. It was great to meet everybody, and thanks for the invite. This was, yeah, I really enjoyed presenting, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And by the way, please eat if you haven't eaten yet. There's lots of food. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. We have prizes.
Oh, heck yeah.
So, and I'm trying not to stand directly in front of the camera because you don't need to see my back. So we have a couple of plushies. We have like 4 different insulated cups, 5 that you'll be able to pick from. Certified hat, notebook, and actually a really nice Salesforce pen. It's very heavy. It's a very nice, if you like pens, it's a very nice pen. Usually we get the little cheapy ones that are plasticky and break up. That's actually a really nice pen. My Salesforce rep was funny because we got it at Dreamforce, and Julie did not want it, which is why you guys get it. And she goes, "Did you know those are like $65?" I'm like, okay. So I'm like, we'll just give it up. So Lori's gonna help us out. She has the wheel of names that she already prepared with everybody's name in there. And so if you spin it, we'll see if they're still here to win something and pick something.
I just did it, and Stephanie was the first one.
Stephanie, your prize. Do you have a cup yet?
Is there like secret money going on?
No, I'm sorry. Tell me the truth. So the first 2 meetings we have, I don't get any budget for swag from Salesforce. Eventually we'll have more. So.
That's a good idea. Ooh, violence. I'll take a pen.
Ooh. pen's gone.
I can charge it you next time.
I'm gonna butcher it.
It's heavy, you'll hurt me. We're gonna do 4 more. One. And so, by the way, Blaze that's here on the table came with me from Dreamforce. I have a picture of myself when I was carrying 4 of them because I kind of hogged them when I was at Dreamforce. It was the last day and they were handing them out. I'm like, sure, I'll take a whole bunch. My dog stole one of them. My dog stole one of them, so now it's a dog toy, but this one has never been touched by the dog. He was eyeing it. He almost stole it. And so what would you like? Pick one. It's up to you. Very nice. Insulated cup. Jackie? I think Jackie left. She had mentees.
Oh, you must be president.
Yeah, it must be present.
Well, if you're gonna pick it up. Well, who's our next winner? Kathy? Yep. Yay. And so, no taking my computer. Thank you.
It's just a Mac.
That was good thinking, though.
Cups, hat.
Cups, hats,
I'll
the
take the tumbler.
tumbler.
What is the difference between this? and
So
this
the
one?
DF one is actually really rare. So these are the ones they were handing out during the group community group leader ones, if you were at Dreamforce, but they're both insulated. So you pick whichever one you want.
Very nice.
Vanna, you should go behind. So behind you, they can't see you.
I'm gonna take the dream.
Yeah, the Dreamforce one, because you are a community group leader.
Yes, this is.
So I have a lot of them, so I just put it out there. So we have 2 more.
Kelsey?
Kelsey, yay! Kelsey, it's really close. Where are you gonna get?
I don't know. Oh, you wanna-
There goes Blaze. One more. What's the last one?
Make sure there's no dog slobber.
Will?
I think Will left.
I said Will left. He was sitting next to your own. So it's called Wheel of Names. You put in the names in there and it just spins forever. Very nice. Well, thank you everybody for your time. I love meeting everybody who I hadn't met and everybody who I used to work with. Great seeing you again. And people I still work with.
I saw people from 2 prior jobs today.
I know, it's awesome. By the way, you have the architect, thank you. You have this group. You have the developer group in Sanford. You have the Health Cloud community group that's online. And then we're gonna be partnering with other groups and Marketing Cloud. Where's Tom? You guys are sitting right next to each other. So Marketing Cloud group also. Are you guys gonna have a November meeting?
We're working.
We were gonna discuss it tonight, but I don't know if we have time.
Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Feel free to stick around and network. Tom, thank you. And thank you everybody that's online. Wonderful seeing everybody. And Mac's about to run out of battery, so have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.